First of all, we have David Lacey, Head of Commercial at the RVL Group.
Good morning.
It's good to see. Thank you very much for coming along, David. We also have Gus Patterson, who's Chief Operating Officer at Pula. And I'd call you the offshore side of the activities, if you don't mind. It's Guernsey based for anyone who doesn't know. And then last to the table is Bernard Fragner. And you've already seen a little bit of information shared about Bernard's group. He's CEO of Globe Air, and the activity of what's going on in Europe is really fascinating. So we've got a mix of UK-based, our offshore, and European colleagues to really look at what's going on in their marketplace. The question that I'm going to pose, and I will be starting with David first to them, is really, can you tell us a little bit about the organisation and scope of what you're doing, how you dealt with what's going on in the pandemic and some of the knock-on from Brexit, and then what you're going to see going forward from your business and what's going to be happening to the market? We've seen what Richard thinks, but it'd be nice to get your perspective. So you're going to get pinned to the screen first, David. So don't worry, you'll go large and into the centre. For people who've got questions, feel free to, as it goes along, put your questions in the Q&A and we'll pick up what we can, but we'll also endeavour to, if we can't cover it, we'll get those questions posed after the event. So over to you, David.
Thank you, Mark. Morning, everybody. First off, I want to say thank you to everybody at the BBGA BBGA even for inviting me on. For those of you that don't know about the RVL Group, RVL stands for Reconnaissance Ventures Limited. We still do a lot of reconnaissance, but thanks to the operating permit system, we can't venture very far these days. But I'll talk a bit more about that later on. We're based at East Midlands Airport, and we have a fairly eclectic fleet. We've got Cessna 404s, Ream Cessna 406s, King Airs, and we just recently had the Saab 340 freighter join the fleet. We operate across quite a mix of areas. So we have survey flights, both governmental and for private sector clients, air taxi passenger flights, and scheduled and ad hoc cargo. If I was looking back over the past 12 months, I think I'd probably split it into really sort of three parts. And I think as it has been for everybody, it's been a real roller coaster. At the start of the pandemic, I think if you looked, say, from probably March to about May time, obviously everybody was very badly affected, and we had a slowdown across all sectors. The only part of our business that really operated as normal were our scheduled cargo routes that we had. We had to stop survey flying because we operate quite small aircraft, and we couldn't have our crew and operators in close proximity for COVID reasons. So the survey flights stopped. A lot of our air taxi activity stopped. So we had a very difficult 3 months, and we were concentrating on protecting the business, protecting our team, keeping as many people out of the office as possible, and really reducing the risk down to our operational staff who kept working throughout and did a fantastic job to keep our aircraft flying. So that was kind of the bad news at the start of the year. I think then what surprised us was then actually how strongly things came back in the second half. And from June to December, we were extremely busy. So we resolved our survey issues by putting in what was called a temporary COVID barrier, but I like to think of it as basically a massive piece of cling film between the crew and the operators. Obviously, as this is aviation, it was very expensive and special cling film, but that's pretty much what it was. So that got our survey customers flying again. Air taxi, we were very busy. We manage a very nice King Air for our friends at Islefly on Jersey. And that aircraft just basically didn't stop flying all summer. It flew non-stop. But probably our biggest growth area was ad hoc cargo. And that was across two sectors, automotive and basically COVID. So on the automotive side, the factories soon got very busy again, and we've been flying spare parts all across Europe. And then the other pickup was on COVID. So we've if I look over the past few months, we've flown actual COVID tests, samples that needed testing. We've flown spare parts to make COVID test kits. We've actually flown some COVID test machines. And right at the end of December, one of it was my favourite charter or not, but we flew what were euphemistically called wastewater samples for COVID testing. So pretty much summed up 2020 when we were flying boxes of sewage around at the end of the year. But there you go. And you know, so I think in the final week of December, actually every single one of our charters, bar one, was COVID related. And to sort of cope with that level of demand, one of the things that we did do to increase our cargo fleet before we got the Saab is that we've got a King Air that operates in an 8-seat commuter config, which means it's actually quite easy to take the interior out. And what we did with that aircraft was order a cargo floor system for it, and we've actually been operating one King Air as a QC. So it flies passenger flights, and then it takes about an hour to put the cargo floor system in. And that was very useful for flying things around like COVID samples. So we actually finished the year a lot stronger than we thought we would. You know, with everything else that was going on, we had a very strong, especially autumn time. And then I guess, as with a lot of other colleagues on the call at the moment, yeah, for me personally, I went to bed on New Year's Eve in the 21st century, and I think I woke up on the 1st of January 1956, because we then woke into the permit system, which has just been a nightmare pretty much from the 1st of January onwards. Now, I could rant about this, as I often do in the office, for the next hour, but sort of trying to keep a balanced perspective on it. We have found some countries have been absolutely great, you know, but for our King Airs and 406s, we do have certain places in Europe that we can go to without a permit. We've got other countries where we need to get a permit for the Saab, where their permit offices have actually been really helpful. Slovakia in particular have been great when we've needed an out-of-hours permit there. But then we've had other countries where it's been particularly difficult. I'm thinking of Germany and Spain in particular, where we've had issues with permits, with our security plan, just with a whole host of things that's made our environment very difficult. And then again, as UK operators, what we've had to live with is the fact that our European competitors have been given a block permit underneath 10 tons. So I spent January in particular watching our competitors in the smaller aircraft segment basically running rings around us. And we've had issues with, we think, brokers not contacting us because they think it's easier for the EU carriers to get a permit. Basically very difficult, but you know, it has eased over the past few weeks as we've got used to the system. But yeah, very frustrating as a UK business to have to cope with that. And you know, I'm looking over to my right here at the lovely collection of permits that I now have. Lots of different headed paper, although Slovakia are old school with an AFTN, which is always nice to see. But yeah, you know, we're battling through. But it is frustrating that with all you know, lockdown, COVID, etc., in some ways Brexit or the permit system has been more disruptive than what we saw last year with COVID. Yeah, hopefully, you know, going forward it will ease. But the first 2 months have not done much for my blood pressure when I'm trying to get a permit for a time critical cargo flight. So I think, you know, that's pretty much it for me. So from the RBL perspective, I would be interested obviously to hear the you know, from Bernard's perspective and just what they've seen.
Oh, thank you very much, David. That's a nice segue into Bernard, actually. Look, making the point that you just did, and it came up during the permitting session, I'm not sure how everyone appreciates the support, cargo support that our community provides just in time and the ferrying round of things. So it's just as important for that Fifth Freedom stuff for our cargo activity as it is for scheduled operations. So we can't underplay that too much. Thank you very much for making that point. Right, I'm going to shift on to you, Bernard, and ask for your perspective.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Good day to everybody. Great to be here. And again, Mark, thank you for your invitation. First, a big shout out to the entire BBGA team. I think what the team has done in the background to set up all this platform and this really sophisticated conference format with arenas and tables and so on and so forth. Really well done. I think you have a great team. So congrats, Mark. Well done. Yeah, I would say my team and I have made a lot of learnings since June. I would say during the main lockdown period, so where we all had the borders down from mid-March to mid-June, there was not much business. We did some domestic flights in various European countries, but that's it. And then, as expected, as of mid-June, it hit us like a big tsunami. So we were quite busy over the summer. Was, of course, a record summer since 13 years we are operating. And we had some challenges to get the logistics done, but was manageable. And personally, myself, I thought from November on, we will dive into a really cold winter season. Because of all these, let's say, confusing restrictions, travel restrictions, test requirements, paperwork needed to travel between one country to the other. And I was convinced that basically the businessmen and also for leisure, those people are scared and they want to basically stay at home and don't take all the burden and the hassle for traveling. But it was actually the opposite. We went through November, was quite interesting, record numbers in terms of flight movements and volume. Same with December. And then we had the same, let's say, assumption that from Christmas onwards, we will then have a big decline in demand. But it was, again, the opposite. It was facing all these troubles and issues to tackle. There are a few learnings out of this. So first is, I think you have seen some of the previous slides provided by Richard from WingX. One-ways have increased significantly. Simply the fact that people are traveling to a city or to an area and they were shy to book the return flight because they don't know which new restrictions coming up. So many governments just announcing a press conference, and then the politicians announcing the new restrictions, which then basically come in place the next day. So there's not much planning horizon, and it's still not there. And this led to the customer is really planning a short notice. So what's coming tomorrow, what's coming to the day after tomorrow. Which brings also and not an easy task to find, let's say, a fleet schedule and optimizing the fleet around. It helps a bit that the customer is less price sensitive, what we have seen. So they know that they have to take and book the flight and not to shop around much, because it's to arrange the logistics takes a bit of a time, and also the paperwork, so the overhead work. What we have seen, the admin work is huge. We have to organize testing for our customers. We have to send them somewhere. We have to check the papers. We have to, forward the papers to the arrival airport, and sometimes check with the the health officers, is this the correct paper they're accepting? Are they allowing us that the passengers can deboard and then enter to the country? So talking to my team, they said the number of work of overhead per flight has doubled or tripled, and this, so we had even to add more people to our customer service team to manage the flights, which has additional costs. But I think this is it, and this will stay for quite a while. Big hassles, and I think one of the most headache we have is crew logistics. So finding hotels and easy things like where do you get dinner and lunch for crew? It becomes a task, yeah. And then to position crew. The airlines are down. I mean, you have seen the numbers. So bringing the aircraft from the aircraft back home and from home to the aircraft is a nightmare. And we have seen recent things like crew shows up with a valid antigen test, and then on the gate they tell you, no, crew is not accepted with the antigen test, you have to take a PCR test. Then we say, well, crew is exempted. No, we don't accept. So we have seen all kind of things. We are throwing money out of the window because obviously airlines are not properly educated. Also the staff on the at the gate, quite difficult and quite challenging. And we have completely moved away from our stable roster. So our crew is basically flying on unstable roster, 6 days on duty, 10 days on duty. We cannot predict because it depends everything on traveling. Yeah, so massive increase on the overhead to organize and arrange flights. Very much let's say an uncertain planning horizon. It's all about the next days. I mean, we have more than 95% of our revenue develops the next 48 hours. So this is really something new. We hope this will not stay. And crew logistics. In terms of Brexit, I mean, I think Brexit for us is hidden also by the reduced flight activity caused by the pandemic. I think we have not seen the Brexit at its full extent because it's basically covered by the pandemic. So let's see what's coming when it gets a bit easier and restrictions get lifted. But I think it's good now that the countries are working on those block permits, and then that we get back to kind of a mode we had pre-Brexit, and pandemic gives us or buys us some time, I would say now. Yeah, overall, I think we can look forward to a strong 21 and 22. The main driver is really the airlines will not come back that strongly. Personally, I think one of the comments we heard earlier that 50% of business travel will disappear. I think this is reality. However, C-level and senior management still have the need to travel. This is what we see right now, and those group will continue to travel. That's why I think business aviation overall has a bright future for the next 2 years. But I think it's important that we resolve this Brexit issue, that we can get back to a kind of operations as we were used to it, as aviation is international.
Bernard, thank you very much for that summary. Some really interesting points, and I've heard it said in more than one place that we are getting a masking effect of what Brexit really means because of the situation we're in with the pandemic. So I'm not going to say there's a silver lining associated with that in terms of smoothing the process, but it certainly has coloured it, that's for sure. Right, I'll come back to you later on, but I'm going to move on and ask for Gus to give a summary of his operation, because we've got a couple of very different flavours so far of what's going on, and love to hear what you have to say, Gus.
Thanks, Mark. Well, first I'll echo the comments that the others have made about the AirMeet platform. It's fantastic, and the obvious amount of effort that's gone into setting this up is, well, much appreciated. It's a fantastic virtual event. I think, actually, I'd echo a lot of what Mark and Bernard have said in terms of the way things have changed, particularly the last-minute bookings and the cargo work, which is something we didn't really used to do a lot of in the past, and we've seen a lot of AOG parts work for aircraft coming in, which is well, long may it continue, but it's certainly a diversion. I'll start with a little bit about us. Pooler Aviation Services has 4 main business units. We have a UK GREG AOC in Centreline, which operates everything from the King Air C90 up to a new Falcon 8X. We have a Part 145 business, ASG. We have FBOs in both Bristol and Guernsey, and we have an aircraft sales business in Pooler Aircraft Sales. We've also recently acquired the residual trading assets and the brand of Capital Air Ambulance, and we've started operations with an aeromedical capability using King Air 200s just in the last month. For the pandemic, I think by chance, we had taken the decision to move our management team online using Microsoft Teams about 18 months ago for various reasons. And so when the initial UK lockdown hit, I think as an organization, we had relatively little disruption, certainly to our back office. And we took the decision to carry on flying throughout. March last year was actually our busiest March ever. We had a fantastic month. It dried up for a couple of months, and then, as the others have said, we had a very, very busy summer in 2020. Things started to tail off towards the end of the year, and certainly since the most recent UK lockdown, it's gone very, very quiet for us. We are still flying. We're doing a few trips a week. But this is probably the trough. We've taken the opportunity to bring forward some maintenance inputs, and of course we're making full use of the flexible furlough scheme. I think, again, it's not a surprise. It's very similar to what the others have said. The main challenge for us is keeping track of the shifting sands in Europe. I think juggling both the permit requirements and the various COVID restrictions has been a challenge. On the permit requirements, we have block permits in place now for Italy, France, and Greece for all of our aircraft, and we have one in place for the ambulance flights to Ireland. Our flight services provider has been very good at proactively managing the permits for us. I would describe that probably as a hassle rather than a headache, but it has certainly curtailed the amount of work that we can quote for. As to the future, I'm probably at odds with a lot of people in the industry in that I don't really see there being any major change to the EU situation. I think there'll be more block permits made available, but I think that the time-limited and weight-limited block permit system is here to stay. I don't see that there's any particular incentive on the part of the EU to change that. EU operators can already take full advantage of the liberal approach that the UK DFT has taken, as Mark and David have already alluded to. I think this is a landscape that we need to get used to and get comfortable with, as I don't see any significant change once the block permits are in place. Mark, you mentioned the future, and I think that the thing that I wanted to draw out on that is that I think that environmental concerns are going to rear their head again. I think that that issue's not gone away, and I take Bernard's point about senior management wanting to fly, but I think that the activists will emerge from the pandemic armed with proof that a lot of work can be done remotely, and whether you agree that that's the case or not, I think we as a sector will come under huge pressure over the coming years once COVID's in the rearview mirror. And I think that for us as a business, that's going to be a major focus. As an example of that, we're offering staff now at our Bristol FBO. We're the first non-network UK location to do so. And I think that that's suddenly gone from being something we know we're going to need to address, I think, to being a major priority for us as we emerge from the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You threw away some nice finishing points there, Gus, in terms of the position of environmental lobby and what we're going to be facing. For those who haven't picked up, obviously there's a lot of work going on with IBAC and the SAF program and everything that we're trying to do as a sector, but we can't be naive about this. We're actually going to have to face this head on, because we've very clearly got a switch going on where people will choose to use our sector to continue to do business. And we can easily get ourselves as the bad boys of aviation when actually we all know that our contribution is relatively very small, but that's not an argument that we put out in the public domain. So I think it's a really important point that you make, and I think that's going to be one of the next biggest things that we have to focus on as we emerge out of this once we're all trading again. So that's appreciated. Got a question really to put out, not just to you, but to the rest of the team. We're seeing changes taking place, and one of the questions that came up in advance was, do you think the changing shape of this market might impact the grey charter, or dare I go as strong as saying the illegal charter activity? What do you think? I'll come to yourself, Bernard, maybe first. Do you think that there's anything going on relative to a legal charter that would be shaken out by the changes, or not?
Personally, I would say not. I think we will always face illegal charter, but my observation on the feedback I received from my team is that it has not increased since the outbreak of the pandemic. But also we have no signs that it got less. I think as an industry, we have to continue to educate the customer, because we have a lot of more visibility now in the press. And I would say we have, what was my observation over the last few months, with a very good press. Yeah, the first time I'm in this industry since 20 years, I see a positive reporting press. Yeah, all over, which is great, and not just, I would say, our industry press. It's across all media channels and all kinds of sorts of media. So I think this is good, which then gives also the customer, the existing and the new customers, a very good impression, and what the customer has to look for. And I also have big trust in all CAAs. They do a great job on their spot checks, so ramp checks and then suffer checks. They have well improved these kind of checks. But I think the net of getting illegal charters off the ground gets tighter and tighter. So I think we are improving as an industry, and I would say the pandemic is not in favor of illegal charter.
No, that's a point really well made, Bernard. And just as a reminder for everybody, we've still got the two pieces of legislation coming through that's been driven by ourselves and our colleagues in EBA, with the runway performance, which will level the playing field relative to private AOC operations, and the flight time limitations for crew as well. But seeing where we are with the pace of legislation with the EU, we might be a lot longer away than we would have liked. It should have been in place by now, but we could be 18 months or more away before it becomes a reality. That's not being negative, that's just a fact of where we are. So I think when we get that in place, the point you make about the comms and making it really clear what we're trying to do will actually make it a safer set of operations going forward. Relative to that, Gus or David, do you want to say anything relative to a legal charter?
I think Bernard's covered everything I would have said already. I think that we're in a more compliance environment now with the permit situation and COVID. I think that the chances of, for want of a better phrase, getting away with it are less now, if anything.
Okay. David.
I will choose my words carefully, but we have spotted somebody doing something they shouldn't have been doing, and we did report it. So it's still happening every now and again.
And it's good, and we should do that, and we have the channels open. And I think that the other side of this, there will be more focused multi-agency interventions rather than just relying on SAFA. So I think if it's something that we can target, we can actually try and do something about it. But okay, thank you, David. I've seen, first question that popped up here. With commercial air travel tattered, that's harsh, do you think flight sharing will now turn into business jet usage? Diplomatic answers, please. Who wants to go first? Bernard,
Yeah, it's a real good one. Yeah, appreciate that question from Leo. Yeah, so we see this the discussion is huge. You know, this flight shaming thing, even on business aviation. And what we have seen that a lot of our customers, even in the request process, asking of carbon neutral programs, what can we do, and so on and so forth. I think this is here, and we have to tackle it, and to tackle it seriously. I think the sustainability discussion is not gone. It might be a bit covered and masked now during the pandemic, but it becomes a huge topic since last June, even in our operation. People are proactively asking for it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything else the other two wish to add? Okay.
No, thanks, Mark.
I think I see a note from Dave Kendrick on the side in the Q&A encouraging people to carry on reporting because it is being monitored. And I know they're rather occupied, but there'll always be people who want to focus on this with us because we just don't want to see it in our industry at all. Okay, you've actually mentioned, and Bernard mentioned the impact on operating costs. How do you guys feel that you've been supported by your respective governments and regulators through the process of pandemic, really? I'm going to start top left corner is Gus.
I have to say, and I know there'll be people taking in a sharp intake of breath, that I think that the CAA has done a superb job, actually, since this began. I think right from the get-go, we had first-class engagement from our flight operations inspector and our engineering inspector. We were talking to them continuously. Things were handled in a timely, flexible way. We were able to jump on calls and work through issues that arose, and I think I couldn't honestly come up with anything particularly negative about the way that the CAA have handled this. It's been a very positive experience.
Okay, thank you very much. How about your perspective, Bernard, looking in from the other side? Have you had support in your country for your activities?
Yeah, actually, authorities, or let's say the surveyors and inspectors were very supportive. They said, okay, we're all in the same boat and we have to fight together. The biggest issue we had on training, to be honest, because the training format and the training approved, we had ground training and even the sim training, we couldn't conduct as we have stipulated in our manuals, and we needed a quick change to that. But unfortunately, that's not that easy. So we needed a very urgent EASA-approved ALTMOC. And we were quite surprised that our surveyors even worked through Christmas to get this done, that we can, that we don't go beyond any due date of our mandatory trainings. And they worked very hard, despite they also had to cut back. So I know from the Austrian CA, they had to accept raise cuts, also salary cuts, and they were on reduced work, so they basically by half, but the workload probably remained the same. But we're very supportive in a very friendly environment, and I really appreciate what all these authorities had to tackle in addition to the day-to-day work. So, and I see this positivity all across, and as we have seen, like David has outlined. So they were really on the positive side that the industry can continue to work and fight the hassles and the daily issues we have. So quite supportive. I would say was a good learning, and we have seen that we are one industry, and this is not, the let's say the consumers and the agencies and the CAs. We are basically one sector and one family.
I can see some nodding on our own panel, and I would just reiterate that the fact that it's actually made people work together a lot more in a positive way, and it's been the one, I like the term you used, the one industry. doesn't matter whether you're regulator or government or industry itself. I've seen a lot more effort on trying to work together. So hopefully that model, we can carry it through and people don't go into their own smokestacks later on. So, but good point. David, is there anything that you'd like to add, the experiences that you faced?
Yeah, I think the first thing to say is that we've had some fantastic help from the CAA this year. Specifically, we brought the Saab 340 onto our AOC towards the end of the year, so that the help that we had to do that in a very quick timescale has been fantastic. On the permit side, I guess it's there are two sides to it. Where we've had issues, the CA have been very helpful. I think David Kendrick's on the session. There have been some days where I must have spoken to him, or he's been my agony aunt 3 or 4 times a day on some occasions. But obviously, from a governmental perspective, and I'm talking very much, we are from a time critical cargo perspective. We feel let down over the block permit system because our main competitors in that space are European, and they've had access to a UK block permit that we've not had reciprocated from their countries. And from what Gus was saying earlier about the block permits that he's got, we have the Italian block permits, which is great. It covers passenger and cargo. But for example, the new French block permit, it only covers passenger. It isn't issued for time critical cargo. So as a big cargo operator, we have been impacted by it. But say where we have had a day-to-day issue, both with yourselves, Mark, at the BBGA, the CAA, everybody has gone into bat on our behalf, which has been fantastic.
No, that's and actually that's an opportunity to mention the fact the signed discussions and agreements. The French move is only an interim reaction. That's not the agreement. So our team will still be negotiating. That's just a reaction to process at this point in time. So the door's not slammed shut.
That's good to know.
So, right, I'm going to ask something that actually, Bernard, you mentioned in yours and Richard mentioned in his presentation, and that's empty legs from the point of view of the impact that it's having. Do you think the use of the empty legs, because of the shape of the market, has introduced a whole new range of potential clients for the future? Even different age band. What's the mix and what are you seeing from it, if you don't mind me asking?
No, great. No, good question. So, I mean, the entire industry is talking about the utilization of these empty legs, I think, since decades. And we have seen, I think, over the last 10 years, a few initiatives to bring them closer to the end consumer. However, I think the difficulties are that those empties appearing on very short notice, yeah. And then even if you book an empty, what is about the return, yeah. However, I mean, we are producing, I would say, roughly 2,000 to 3,000 empty sectors a year, which is quite a lot. And of course, we're interested to get this number down. But I think one thing is we have to accept that it's part of the business. But we have seen the more we communicate in various channels like social media, where we have introduced WhatsApp for businesses and we're working on an alerting system, the bigger the audience you can reach, the higher the chances you can sell those. And interestingly, as you said, Mark, there are new customers coming in and fairly younger generation. We have seen that. So let's say from the 20s to the 30s, because they're used to traveling. And don't get me wrong, I think it was wrong in the past years that you can fly from London to, I don't know, Palma for £29, have a party and then come back. I think this is not real. The value representing of what the service aviation provides to the society. However, we have a generation or a group, let's say, who are educated to use the services and being around and so on. And now the empty legs are kind of a way that they can continue to explore Europe, to explore different cities and so on and so forth, what they really want and what they really like. And some of those who are used to that now looking for empty sectors. So we see way more questions around the empty sector. So when it's available, what is the price, how can I book it, and so on and so forth. And it correlates with the number of communication, or let's say the intensity of communication to the market. And I think we should continue. Maybe we have not cracked the code yet, to communicate it properly to the market. Maybe digitalization continues in a way that we can bring it closer to potential new customers, which then at the end turn into a regular customer. But I think we have to work as an entire industry to tell about, let's say, these options. And then overall, if we get the numbers down of empty sectors, I think we can benefit of higher margins and better profitability.
Yeah, that's the point. The market is biased at the moment because of where we are. There's a question here with a slightly commercial edge to it. What is the pickup of the empty legs? What sort of proportion are being used? Bernd, I think the question was directed, how many empty legs are actually taken up, was the term. 5%, 10%, or no comment?
So prior to the pandemic, we were able to sell 3 to 5% of the empties, yeah, and this number has doubled constantly. So it is now permanent since June that we were selling about 10% of our empties to the market, yeah. But we also have to consider we increased the number of the way we communicate, yeah. So you cannot really compare it because our communication prior to the pandemic was less. But it correlates. The more you communicate, the more options you're offering, the higher the chances you're selling.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you. I'm going to pose one last question and then give everyone a comfort break before we get into the AGM. There's a question about future electric activity. And what do you guys think about the short range, the 100 nautical mile, I won't say autonomous, but actually for electric powered aircraft and the impact that it could have on your market? Just as a nice parting shot. Thoughts? Gus, you move first. I'm going to go to you.
I think it's coming. I think because it's doable, somebody will do it. So I think that to bury your head in the sand is probably not a smart strategy here. I think Bristol Airport certainly here have indicated that they're very keen to support that in terms of ground transportation to the airport. So I think that's something we would obviously support. I think in terms of it being in competition with us, I don't see that. I think it's a different thing entirely. It's more likely to replace your taxi to the airport than it is to replace your charter flight.
Thank you. David, any comment?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with Gus. I think we looked at a couple of things last year on regional connectivity and electric flights, and I think it is coming. I think some of the things that we've seen is probably more likely to affect the train operators than some of the charter flights that we operate. But yeah, it's as with electric cars, I think it's an unstoppable force, basically.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'm going to call an end to the session. Just Dave Kendrick made a note about block permits, actually in the Q&A, highlighting the limit is 10 tonne and 19 seats. So I just think he wanted to make that a notice to everyone else. We haven't given away absolutely everything as far as that's concerned. Look, thank you very much for taking the time to come and join us today, gentlemen. It's been much appreciated. Thanks for your candid opinions, and I shall leave you alone, but enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Mark.